What if I told you the most important weapons of the next century won't look like helicopters, tanks, fighter jets, or warships? They won't have pilots, they won't sleep, they won't feel fear, and they won't come home. They're autonomous. Right now, quietly and rapidly, warfare is being transformed by autonomous systems operating in the air, on land, and at sea. And most people still think that drones are hobby toys or surveillance cameras. It's kind of a mistake. Because what's happening right now is one of the biggest shifts in military history since the invention of gunpowder or nuclear weapons. Today, I want to walk you through how autonomous combat systems are changing warfare, why every major military power is racing to deploy them, and what this means for the future of conflict, including what it means for countries like ours. This isn't science fiction. This is already happening. And once you understand where this is going, it's very hard to look at war the same way again. This is North of MAGA. I'm your host, Pierre Shields. Let's dive in. Why autonomy changes war. To understand why autonomous systems matter so much, you first have to understand the biggest limitation in warfare for the past several hundred years. Humans. Human soldiers get tired. Human pilots make mistakes. Human reaction time is slow compared to machines. And humans are expensive to train, equip, and replace. Autonomous systems remove those limits. A drone doesn't need sleep. It doesn't panic under fire. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't need to be rescued if something goes wrong. And once you remove the human from the cockpit or the battlefield, war changes. That's why nearly every major military power on Earth is investing heavily in autonomous systems. Not just the United States and China, but also Russia, Israel, Turkey, Iran, and a growing number of Middle East powers. And this revolution isn't happening in just one domain. It's happening in the air, on the ground, and at sea. Air, the rise of combat drones. Let's start with the air, because that's where most people first encountered military drones. Early drones were basically flying cameras. They were slow, remotely piloted, and mostly used for surveillance. Later, they were armed with missiles and used for targeted strikes. But modern combat drones are something completely different. Today's systems can fly at high subsonic speeds, evade radar, operate in contested airspace, and coordinate with other aircraft in real time. Some of them don't even need a runway. They can be launched from trucks, ships, or aircrafts. That's true. Did you see what happened with the drones that were launched from, was it train containers in Russia deep inside the country and destroyed tons of airplanes? Wow. The biggest change, though, is autonomy. Modern drones can now navigate, identify targets, and coordinate with other systems with minimal human input. In some cases, humans approve the mission and the drone executes it on its own. In other cases, the drone can operate semi-independently and only check in when necessary. This is what's known as a loyal wingman concept. Unmanned aircraft flying alongside crewed jets, extending their sensors, carrying weapons, and taking risks that human pilots can't. Countries like the United States, China, and Australia are already testing these systems. Turkey has proven how effective drones can be in real combat. And in Ukraine, we've seen firsthand how cheap drones can destroy extremely expensive equipment. A $20,000 drone can knock out a multi-million-dollar tank. That changes the economics of war entirely. Tiny drones and drone swarms are used for nighttime displays, but the scary and nightmarish thing is that they can be used for pretty nefarious things as well. Land, robotic warfare on the ground. But the air is only part of the story. On the ground, autonomous systems are evolving just as quickly, and in some ways even more dramatically. Modern ground robots can already perform reconnaissance, deliver supplies, clear mines, and provide remote fire support. Some are tracked vehicles the size of small cars. Others are small enough to be carried by a single soldier. They can move through dangerous terrain, scout ahead of troops, and even operate in chemical or radioactive environments where humans can't go. In Ukraine, both sides are experimenting with robotic ground vehicles for resupply and surveillance. Israel has deployed automatic border systems for years. The United States is testing robotic combat vehicles designed to operate alongside armored units. The long-term goal is clear: reduce human exposure on the battlefield. Instead of sending soldiers into dangerous zones, militaries want to send machines. And as artificial intelligence improves, these systems won't just follow commands. They'll analyze terrain, identify threats, and adapt in real time. Have you seen the robotic dogs? I think from Boston Dynamics. Really impressive, really scary. I'll try to put some footage. Sea, the most important battle space. Now let's talk about the sea, the domain most often overlooked, and in my humble opinion, just as important as aerial drones for Canada. Naval warfare is being quietly transformed by autonomous systems faster than almost anywhere else. The ocean is vast, expensive to patrol, and incredibly difficult to monitor with traditional ships alone. Modern navies are deploying unmanned surface vessels and autonomous underwater vehicles that can operate for weeks or even months without human crews. These systems can patrol shipping lanes, track submarines, layer clear mines, and conduct surveillance without risking sailors' lives. For countries like Canada, this is especially important. Canada has the longest coastline in the world, an Arctic that is becoming more accessible every year, and growing strategic interest from Russia and China. Manned submarines are expensive and limited in number. Autonomous underwater vehicles can operate silently, cheaply, and in large numbers. This is why navies around the world are investing heavily in unmanned maritime systems. The future ocean battlefield will be shaped not by the giant fleets alone, but by networks of machines working together beneath the surface. Did you hear about the president of the US wanting to have a new class of battleship? Who's built a battleship in the past 80 years? The AI question. Now we reach the most controversial part of the entire discussion, artificial intelligence. Modern military AI doesn't think like humans, but it does something just as important. It processes information faster than humans ever could. It can track targets, identify patterns, coordinate assets, and make decisions in milliseconds. The debate isn't whether AI will be used in warfare. It already is. The real debate is how much control humans will retain. Some countries insist on a human in the loop, meaning a person must approve lethal action. Others operate with a human in the loop where systems act unless overridden. And some are quietly moving towards full autonomy. That's where the real risk lies. Because once machines can decide when to fire, escalation becomes faster than human judgment. In my humble opinion, it's just a question of time before they're fully autonomous. The speed at which any IT system evolves is just really, really fast. What's actually happening in Canada right now? Canada is already building and testing autonomous combat military-grade robotic systems, quietly and often without much public attention. This isn't theoretical, this is happening right now. Air, uncrewed aerial systems. CAE Montreal, Quebec. CAE is one of the world's largest military simulation and training companies. They are heavily involved in AI-assisted mission simulations, autonomous flight training environments, loyal wingman concept modeling, sensor fusion, and pilot AI teaming. While CAE doesn't build armed drones themselves, they build the brains and training infrastructure that allows autonomous and semi-autonomous air systems to operate safely alongside human pilots. L3 Harris Westcam in Burlington, Ontario. This is a big one. Westcam produces the electro-optical targeting systems used on military drones, maritime patrol aircraft, ISR platforms, and armed UAVs worldwide. Their MX series sensor balls are used on drones operating in combat zones right now. These systems are the eyes that autonomous platforms rely on to detect, track, and identify targets. Without companies like Westcam, autonomous combat systems simply don't function. Land, robotic, and autonomous ground systems. ClearPath Robotics in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. This is one of Canada's most important defense adjacent companies. ClearPath builds autonomous ground vehicles, robotics platforms used for military R&D, and AI navigation and mobility systems. Their technology has been used in military research programs, autonomous convoy testing, and robotics platforms adapted for surveillance and logistics. Their spin-off, Auto Motors, focuses on autonomous vehicles for industrial environments, but the underlying tech is directly transferable to military logistics and resupply vehicles. DRDC, Defense Research and Development Canada. This is Canada's military R&D arm. They're actively researching autonomous land vehicles, human-machine teaming, AI decision support systems, swarm behavior, and autonomous ISR platforms. DRDC has tested robotic ground scouts, semi-autonomous convoy vehicles, and AI-assisted battlefield awareness tools. They don't produce weapons, they design the doctrine and tech that future systems will use. C, where Canada is quietly focused. Canada is very serious about unmanned maritime systems. Kraken Robotics are in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. Kraken Robotics builds autonomous underwater vehicles, synthetic aperture sonars, and mine detecting and seabed mapping systems. Their platforms are used by NATO navies, the Royal Canadian Navy, and offshore security operations. Their systems are ideal for Arctic surveillance, mine countermeasures, submarine detection, and infrastructure monitoring. And most important of all, they operate without crews for long durations in harsh environments. Exactly what Canada needs in the Arctic. Thales Canada, Lockheed Martin Canada. Lockheed Martin, okay. Yeah, we're going to put it in there anyway. Both companies are deeply involved in naval combat systems, autonomous surface vessels integration, AI-assisted sonar processing, and uncrewed maritime coordination. Canada's future surface fleet and Arctic patrol strategy is being designed with uncrewed systems in mind, even if that language isn't always public, because it scares people when they talk about AI and autonomous systems, Skynet and all. Is Canada buying autonomous combat vehicles? Not officially, yet, but the direction's clear. Canada is actively evaluating uncrewed surface vessels for Arctic patrols, autonomous underwater vehicles for surveillance, loyal wingman-style drones to support fighters, AI-enabled ISR platforms, and autonomous logistics vehicles. The Canadian Army has already tested robotic resupply vehicles, autonomous ground scouts, and remote weapon stations. And NATO interoperability requirements are effectively forcing Canada to prepare for autonomous warfare, even if politically it avoids the word autonomous weapons. The reality is this: Canada may not field killer robots tomorrow, but it's absolutely building the infrastructure to support them. That's kind of scary. What this means for Canada. Canada can't ignore this shift. Our military is small, our territory is vast, our budgets are limited. Autonomous systems offer a way to monitor the Arctic, reduce risks to personnel, extend reach, and compensate for limited manpower. But they also require advanced software, secure communications, AI expertise, and domestic industrial capacity. Without those, Canada becomes dependent on foreign suppliers for critical military systems, and we know how that can go. And that creates vulnerability. If Canada wants to remain credible, they must invest not only in platforms, but in the technology and industry behind them. The real danger. The real danger isn't robots taking over. The real danger is speed. Autonomous systems move faster than humans can react. That increases the risk of mistakes, miscalculations, and unintended escalation. Wars can begin in minutes instead of weeks. That's why doctrine, oversight, and restraint matter as much as technology. Final takeaway. Autonomous weapons aren't coming. They're already here. They're reshaping how wars are fought, how power is measured, and how countries defend themselves. The future of conflict won't be decided by the largest army. It'll be decided by the smartest systems, the fastest networks, and nations willing to adapt. Whether we like it or not, that future has already begun. If you want clear Canada First analysis without noise, make sure you subscribe to North of MAGA. If you found this useful, hit the like button and share it with someone who still thinks drones are just flying cameras. And let me know in the comments, should autonomous weapons be limited, or are they simply the next step in warfare? So don't forget, I would like you to please, if you like the video, to like it, subscribe, comment, share, click notifications. Am I forgetting something? I don't know. So thanks for spending time with me. I'm Pierre Shields for North of MAGA. Go play outside.